Hello, you Malty. Merrily mispronouncing Mulgai. That's a malt mention, and I think it needs some explanation. But first of all, I'll give the malt mention credit to Patty1987, who has provided the malt mention and possibly lives in or around Glasgow, because there is a suburb. It's a very pleasant place, actually, in the north of Glasgow called Mulgai, except when you look at it and pronounce it phonetically, it's pronounced Mulgavy, right? And it's endlessly entertaining to Ouijies, that's Glaswegians, when someone comes in from another part of the country, and it could be another part of Scotland, and sees the name Mulgai and then pronounces it Milngavie. I make that mistake when I pronounce Arkansas. You know, it's an easy mistake to make, and one has to ask, is the English language deliberately created to trip people up and belittle people and put people down and confuse people because it's not phonetic? Translations are simply not phonetic, and you'll probably agree with me because you're into Scotch whisky and you know how many times all of us, by the way, including Scottish people, are mispronouncing distillery names, and the distillery think it's a really good laugh. And they love to correct you. Oh, no. It's not Glen Moray, it's Glen Murray. Well, why has it got an O and not a U? And how on earth do you pronounce Bunnahabhain? And how on earth do you pronounce Tamnavullen? This is deliberate, by the way. These words are Gaelic words. Gaelic is a non-English language with very ancient Middle Eastern origins, which have been suppressed in the annals of history, as so much history is suppressed. And what you get is this default superiority of the English language, in that it's saying if you try pronounce it using the English letter codes, you're going to get it wrong. And therefore, it's a confusing language that you shouldn't bother too much about. This is all the psychology behind it. Academics would say differently, but academics, as much as many, are very good and honourable people. One of their jobs is to actually contain and suppress too much free-minded thinking. They are gatekeepers, in fact. That could be for the right reasons, but also we need to keep in mind for the wrong reasons. And this is the sort of conversation that we have in Ralphie Review 1005 Extras, when we happen to have a wee visit from a friend who's getting into whisky. Now, I'm sure you've poured a wee dram for someone as an experienced whisky drinker, single malt Scotch whisky, but not necessarily. You can get the same effect with some bourbons, ryes, rums and cognacs and mezcals. And there's this little bit of silence while you monitor their reactions as they first get the smell and then their taste sensations round the experience. It is confusing. It is intimidating. It's good for a laugh. And what we do is we take on the role of mentor. And what we'll find is that when we pour a whisky for ourselves, it's not necessarily the one we're going to pour for a friend or a family member who has basically had their first experience of whisky by grabbing a bottle off a supermarket shelf on a deep discount just before Christmas and New Year. And they're saying, actually, I didn't think I would enjoy whisky, but it's nice and creamy and zesty, and it's got that lovely sweet and sour note that you talk about, and you're nodding away, and then you offer them a wee glass of what you've got, and they have a freak out, because again, their senses are only just developing, but they're nowhere near the familiarity that an experienced malt head and whiskey anorak is going to have with their own senses. And this is why I'm going to suggest a little experiment for you, something to share when you're having these esoteric conversations that we often have around whiskey. This is a little experiment for you to share with your far less experienced whiskey friend who's got themselves a glass of something discounted, and you've got a glass of something which is infinitely more flavoursome, but it's young and it's reasonably priced, and you've given them a taste and they're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't like these peated whiskies. I just don't like them at all. What they really mean is their senses are in shock of the first experience, which is full of savoury notes, which often accompany single malt, heavily peated whiskies. Because of this unfamiliarity, because of the shock in relation to their first, second and maybe third experience of something far softer and much more accessible, you're hitting them basically with a mortar bomb of smells and tastes. For starters, the Glenkeith, which I've just reviewed in Ralphie Review 1005, and I'm using as an illustrative example, is soft, Speyside, sweet and sour. There's not a lot going on in the umami savoury range, sensation range, or the bitterness. There's a mild and very tolerable bitterness. It's not imposed, it's not heavy, it's not dramatic, it's not shocking. This whiskey, this Glenkeith non-age statement, is a really, to be honest, nicely made, generic, entry-level, delivering experience. That if people really, really don't like flavour because their sensations are so dumbed down by supermarket sweetness, then they can add some ice cubes, or they can pour in some ginger beer, Coca-Cola, or soda water. You know, nothing's really lost. You know, there's no damage occurs that would happen when someone starts to add Coca-Cola to an integrity delivered, higher end, more flavoursome single malt like Lecheik Rioja Matured from the Sinclair series, which is bottled at 46.3%, unchill filtered and natural colour. This is chill filtered. It's had a little bit of colour added, but to their credit, and I want to mention this, not too much. I mean, I've seen a lot worse in your Johnnie Walker range, put it that way. And also your White and Mackay. Oh my goodness, I've gone from supermarket to supermarket, because I kind of multi-shop. I get certain items in certain supermarkets and other items elsewhere because of availability and cost. And you'll see bottles of White Mackay, and I've seen 3 different colours. The inconsistency of the addition of caramel colouring is a sight to behold. It really is. It's an education. Look out for it yourself. So that's your friend's glass. Mild, unassuming, accessible, approachable, very forgiving. And here's your glass. And you're not maybe particularly interested in the generic whiskey, and your friend is not interested in the shock therapy that is provided by a heavily peated whiskey. So here's what you do. You propose to meet in the middle. And this is where the jam jar comes in. Get a small jam jar and pour some of your mild Speyside, generic, budget, discounted whiskey into the jar. And fill it to a decent level, but not too much, that it means when it's ready, you can share it between 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, so that other people can see the results of the experiment. Then you get a teaspoon. And what we're going to do, and by the way, this happens in the industry, it's called teaspooning. In the industry, when a manufacturer of a single malt does not want their name to be used on labelling for legal reasons, what they do is they teaspoon it. For example, Glenmorangie teaspoons their whisky, and they get another malt from another distillery, so as it can't be a single malt, and they literally put a teaspoon in to a batch they're making up, and that turns it into a blended malt. As a result of which, for legal reasons, it cannot be called single malt, and it cannot be called Glenmorangie. I believe Glenfiddich do the same as well. So I now have my teaspoon filled to the brim, that's 5 millilitres, with Lechac heavily peated whisky. Then what we do, leave it a week. We've now created a blended malt, and the experienced whisky fan is now giving an objective masterclass tutorial on how whiskies blend and bond when they are mixed together. But it takes time. You can't just do this straight into the glass and drink it, because the whisky needs time to marry together. So this is 90% or 95% Glenkeith, very approachable, grassy, uninspiring, okay, single malt. This is at the other end. Both bottles are cheap, so there's no great cost involved. And what you've done is you've teaspooned in some peated whisky to the unpeated whisky. You leave it a week, you can leave it 2 weeks, you can leave it a month. It's going to be fine. Make sure you've got an air gap so the oxygenation can accelerate the bonding process and the blending together. You will come back, you'll pour the same drams again, but you'll have a second dram. And it will be this one. And I'll possibly come, in fact I think I will actually, as another extras in a few weeks' time. I'll come back to these bottlings, I'll leave them aside, I'll come back to them, and I'll just basically compare the results, just to kind of share the event with you. Learning about whisky is not just about pouring over, no pun intended, pouring over what you've just poured. As single malt, blended scotch, whatever its permutation, and just taking it as it's delivered by the producer. When we start to even the most basic of blending, super basic, super simple, all you need is a jam jar and a spoon. It's that simple. We learn a lot more than we expect to learn. We learn far more than we anticipate. And it's building on this very simple experience starts to provide us with the confidence to blend whole bottles together in demijohns to create our unique blended or unique single malt, only available to us. Or alternatively, if we've got a small cask and we've invested a lot of time and money in preparing that cask, of having sourced it and conditioned it, you've prepared it, and you're going to risk your single malt or your other spirit in that cask, you need to know what to do, how to coax it to go right, and what to do if it goes wrong. It can go wrong. It's happened to me. But every step is another step in the learning process. And the more we experiment and play around like this, the more we then put our nose to a single malt or blended malt we've just poured, right, from a bottle, from the producer, and we actually understand how they got there. We understand what's going on inside the experience. I'm Ralphie. I hope you found this interesting. A little bit of an anorak deep dive, but at the same time keeping it as basically as simple as it can possibly get. I mean, it does get simpler when you simply pour a glass and you give a few wee malts in it, but it hasn't had time to bond to blend, to marry up together. And with the jam jar, you've got a very effective interface, which is delivering a far better quality result, whatever that result might be. Thank you for watching my extras. This is what it's all about: extra videos, extra content, extra information regarding extra knowledge for your Malt Moments malt mates. That's why I'm here, slaving away in the bothy to make sure you don't get overly influenced by the banality of contemporary corporate marketing. It's not always the corporations these days, even the small distilleries, with the best of intentions, can flannel you. Hey, it's real life.